Shalom friends, this is the title of video 7, part 2 is How Does Abba's True Calendar Work? And we will be discussing how the calendar intercalates with a few charts later in this video. But now let's take the time to review what the sun and moon do for calendar purposes. And we can clearly see there really is wonderful, absolute empirical evidence for both the Earth and Polaris never moving, and that it's the sun and the moon and the stars which are spinning on wheels above us, just like scriptures say they do. And here's our proof. We can go physically to the North Pole at the time of the spring equinox, or close to this date, and watch the sun as he is just popping up on the horizon for the entire 360 degrees around us. We would be able to literally watch the sun for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for about 6 months. And that runs from spring equinox to fall equinox every year. We would physically be able to see the sun rise higher on the entire 360 degree horizon around us every day for 91 days until the sun reached the Tropic of Cancer. And then it would go lower every day on the horizon to the fall equinox. And then darkness would again return to the North Pole. The sun will move about half of his diameter higher in the sky, and the circles will become measurably smaller by about 32 miles each day on the entire horizon around us. The sun will daily rise on the entire horizon around us in perfect concentric circles every 24 hours. Perhaps this is where we would be able to observe that secret Pony Express station, where the sun daily dismounts and gets on his new horse. He only moves north or south about half of his diameter every day, so it would be hard to track, but not impossible. I personally believe this secret place where the sun changes mounts is over the land of Israel, because of where and when Abba dismounted both the sun and moon off their respective wheels, and they stayed put in one place in the sky for about 24 hours for each of them. And this is recorded in Joshua 10:12 through verses 10. Chapter 10, verses 12 through 15. Then their respective star and moon wheels came back around, and Abba had both the sun and the moon remounted back on their respective wheels. Now this is very likely the one time in history that the moon was prophesied in the book of Enoch to only have 28 days in one of her months. But this timing for the sun was likely when he was making one of his double 48-hour spins anyway, on one of the 2 equinox intercalary days. And so the 364-day year was not messed with. And the total amount of days in history have also remained perfect. The star wheel, even without the sun riding on it, did continue to orbit the proper number of spins, and so did the moon's wheel, even though the moon had also dismounted for 1 day. However, since the moon is normally always in motion, Abba had to skip an entire day for the moon's cycle in order to get her back to where she belonged. She moves about 200 miles north or south every day on the radius of her wheel, and so she had to be instantly moved about 200 miles north or south when she was placed back on that wheel. And thus, what would have been her normal 29-day month was shortened by 1 day to being only 28 for that one time in history. However, the sun was off on his 24-hour timing by about 10 degrees or about 40 minutes, all the way from the time of Joshua to the time of Hezekiah. And the timing of the sun was he went an extra 40 minutes beyond that 24 hours. He was 40 minutes extra. And that needed to be corrected at some point in history. And you can read that story in 2 Kings 20, verses 1 through 11. The sun was actually backed up on the sundial by 40 minutes or 10 degrees, and that was a sign to Hezekiah that Abba had given him 15 more years to live. So at this time, either the entire star wheel had to be stopped and blown backwards, but much more likely, the sun was simply popped off the star wheel, and he alone was blown backwards by that 10 degrees or that 40 minutes. And then he was set back down on the star wheel again. So at that point in history, Abba finally had his clock back on perfect 24-hour time once again. These stories simply show that the sun and moon are nothing more than mechanical, electrical light bulbs and nothing more. Abba can do whatever he wants with them. He can stop them, he can back them up. They're simply devices. They will be destroyed when heaven is destroyed. The luminaries are all very close to us. And Abba says in Genesis that the luminaries were actually placed inside the firmament tent with us. That's why the sun and moon, from our perspective, set every day. They simply get too far away and act just like a light bulb would act on the outside of a house. If we become too far away, the light does not shine from our perspective once we get too far away. For example, put a candle in a room. Up close we can see. Go to the other side of the room and we will no longer be able to see by the light of that candle. Granted, Abba's giant 32-mile in diameter light bulbs take much longer to not be seen than does the light bulb on the outside of a house at night. But both of the respective wheels spin the two large light bulb luminaries out of view by thousands of miles every day. And then they orbit back around on the other side of the sky, and they repeat the process every day. So now I'm going to review this spin chart with you once again. Repetition is really good, and I've got just a few more things to add. So what we'll do is discuss the 24 windows of heaven first. They're about 1,000 miles per window or gate when you consider both sides of the wheel. Just the radius, they are about 500 miles per window. And that's what the sun and the moon use every 6 months. They just use the radius of one side of that wheel. And so they go from month to month, 30-day months, the sun does, and he uses these 6 center windows. There's 6 windows, about 500 miles across for each one. And the sun will stay in those windows 30 days at a time. Then he will spend 1 day on the intercalary days and twice on the equinox and 1 time each on each of the solstices. So let's review the ecliptic. The ecliptic has 4 points where the intercalary days are. Right here where the sun and the moon are right now, that's where the spring equinox is. That would be in gate 4 when the new year is started. And so that's when it's on the equator, the ecliptic. And then if you go up here, this is the one other time that the sun cross that ecliptic, and that's like I said, that would be going in from gate 3 to gate 4, or coming back from gate 4 to gate 3 again. And then you have the 2 solstices. The one that's the closest to the North Pole is the Tropic of Cancer, and that is the summer solstice. That's the longest day of the year. And then over here on the opposite side, this would be the Tropic of Capricorn, when the sun is out on its farthest that it goes out on gate 1. And this happens at the winter solstice. It's the shortest day of the year. Now what I've done is I've just put a few spattering of stars on there. So all these little red dots, those are the constellations. Now we know that there's 88 constellations on this wheel. This wheel spins around us 24 hours a day. You can actually get time-delayed photography of it at night, and you can see all the stars spinning in perfect circles around Polaris every day. It never changes. Thousands of years, it's always been the same. It will always be the same, because the Earth and Polaris never move. It's the star wheels and the moon wheel that spin. So this is how the ecliptic works. The sun and the moon, or the sun will start at the spring equinox, and he will go 364 different mounts on that wheel. And he's on a different mount on that wheel every single day. Now what he'll do is he'll take a complete ecliptic orbit around all 88 constellations within a 1-year period. And then he comes back to the point of beginning again. So he'll use 182 of them while he's going north to the Tropic of Cancer. And he'll use another 182 horses when he's going to the Capricorn, to the winter solstice. And so wherever the sun is on this ecliptic, it is impossible to see the stars. That's why the stars have seasons. It's because the sun is on that ecliptic, and he moves on around the wheel. Well, as he daily moves on around the wheel, there's some stars that he leaves behind. They will then, it'll be darkness, and you can then see them again. Whereas the direction the sun is going, then those stars will become unseen. The sky becomes too bright for us to be able to see those particular stars. Now, here's something neat that we can actually watch. Here's the Big Dipper right here. And the front of that dipper always points towards Polaris. But at the 2 equinoxes, these tails, you'll look at the sky, they'll be totally 180 degrees opposite. That tail will be down here at the spring equinox. Or at the fall equinox. If this is the spring equinox, then at the fall equinox, the tail will be actually pointed 180 degrees opposite. Now that also happens for the 2 solstices. The tail of the Big Dipper will also be pointed 180 degrees opposite of each other. And so that's how we know that the stars have their 4 seasons also. It's simply because the sun is making that ecliptic, and he goes through all 88 constellations, comes back around. They have timing of the year where you can and cannot see certain stars, and that's the reason why. So this is what we believe happened when the sun and the moon were taken off their respective wheels, and they shone for another 24 hours over Israel. Abba would have just simply popped both the sun and the moon off the wheel, and then this wheel would have went on around without them. It would have went clear around. It was about 24 hours extra that the sun and the moon were off their wheels. Well, then when it came back around, they were just stayed here shining. And then Abba would have put the sun back on the wheel. Now the moon had to go another 200 miles. That's where she skipped a day, because she's normally going like this, back and forth, 200 miles every day. She goes back and forth. She bounces like a basketball between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. She'll cross that equator 25 times just in 2019. So she's just bouncing back and forth. So she's going about 9 miles per hour. So she isn't real speedy. But in a 24-hour period, she will have moved 200 miles, which is pretty incredible. So that's what we believe happened at the miracle of Joshua. And then later on, Abba backed up the sun by 40 minutes or by 10 degrees, because the day it said it was about 24 hours. Well, it actually went 40 minutes too long. And so Abba backed it up. I think he just popped the sun back off the wheel and blew the sun backwards in 40 minutes and then stuck him back on. That's what I believe happened. So now let's demonstrate what a new moon happens, and then the different cycles of the moon as it goes around the circle. We believe that at every new moon, it actually shows it that the sun and the moon will actually set together in the same gate. And so after that, the moon will recede from the sun about 11 degrees or about 49 minutes every day. And that, I just did the math on that. That's because it'll come around in 29.5 days. It's either 29 days or exactly 30 days. It's never a 29.5. But it's always, every month always starts with them setting together when the moon is basically empty of her light. And then she will eventually, in the day, grow by 1/14 of her light. So now, we'll just say the sun comes back to this point of origin every single day. The moon will recede by 11 degrees every single day. And then she'll come all the way back around, and by that time it'll be another new moon. So when she gets up here, this is called the first quarter. Well, then she's actually waxing now at this point. And so she's filling her light to the right. Whenever the moon waxes, it waxes from right to left. And whenever it wanes, it also wanes from right to left in the northern hemisphere. Supposed northern hemisphere, where there is no hemisphere. So then now she continues to wax by 11 degrees or 49 minutes every day. She recedes from the sun. And now she gets to the second quarter up here. Well, now she's then full of light. She now has become a full moon. So on each horizon, as the sun is setting and as the moon is rising, that you'll see them on your opposite horizons. And that'll be about 15 days after the new moon. So now she continues to recede by 11 degrees or 49 minutes every day. And now she gets to the third quarter. She's actually waning now. So she's losing her light. So she also wanes from right to left, loses her light from right to left. So this would be approximately what she looks like from us up north. And then she will continue that 11 degrees or 49 minutes every day until she comes back here. She will have lost all her light, and now she's a new moon again. And then the sun and the moon will set together. So now we want to remember this verse right here in commandment number 5 here. The full moon brings on all the years exactly, that their stations may come neither too forwards nor too backwards, a single day from the spring equinox, but that the years may be changed with correct precision in 364 days. In 3 years the days are 1,092, in 5 years they are 1,820, and in 8 years 2,912 days. So now let's explain this chart, this intercalation chart. This deals with the full moon, and it comes in, it shows up at the time of the spring equinox every 3 or 5 years, and it's without fail. You will not find any time in history where this full moon did not show up at the time of the spring equinox every 3 or 5 years. I welcome you, I challenge you to do that. So what we have here is all the years for this particular time period. It's 2011 to 2033. Actually, it's got more below it, but that's all I can get into one screen here. So we've got the year, and these are all full moons at the time of the spring equinox, which basically I've taken all the March dates and put in all the March dates in this chart. And I put in the color blue the ones that pertain to our study here. So over here we've got special check marks on all the years that we intercalate. So that's what those red check marks mean. Now these symbols here are special 6 or 7 year, depending on if it's inclusive, 7-year cycles according to the Dead Sea Scrolls. But they have a middle year which is very special. It's not an intercalation year, but the full moon lands on the start of the year. And then what also is amazing about that year is the equinox is also on that start day of the year. So we know that in 2019, the year started on March 20th. It was a leap year. That's what the LY stands for, is Abba's leap years. So it was a leap year, and it was also a full moon on that day. It was also the spring equinox. And so we accrued 2 days that year. And every year will accrue either 1 day or 2 days. So we have 366 day years every time it's Abba's leap year. Every other year we just accrue 1 day. So that's how we figure that out. And that's why we need to intercalate, because every year Abba's calendar is reckoned in 364 days. But we know in actuality that they are either exactly 365 days or exactly 366 days. There is no fake 365.24322 days. That is a total misrepresentation of how the calendar works. It's never ever lived out in reality. Even the Gregorian does perfect 365 or perfect 366 day years. They never do a partial year. So in this chart, the GER, the Gregorian dates, and when you count those all out, we did a 360 year period of time, and we put both the Gregorian and the Abba's leap years on that calendar, on that chart, and it ended up being exactly the same amount. And so we believe that Abba's leap years truly are controlled by when the full moon comes in for the spring equinox. It just makes sense that he counts leap years every 3 years or 5 years, and it works out perfectly. And these are the years that those 48-hour days at the equinoxes, we believe every year at the spring equinox is a 48-hour day, and that bridges day 364 of the last year with day 1 of the new year. Every year is a 365-day year at least. So then in the fall, when we intercalate on these little check marks and on these middle of these special years, those are also leap years, that's when the fall equinox has a 48-hour day, and that would run from day 182 to day 183, and that includes the Feast of Trumpets, the blowing of trumpets. So what else should I explain on here? Oh yeah, right here. This yellow number here, I'm not sure it'll pick it up on the video, but it's how many days that we are out of sync with nature, with the spring equinox when we intercalate. The worst that we ever go off of actually starting on the spring equinox is 4 days. And so that's how we know we've got the right year also. It's just another sign. But right here is a very big sign. That's the days that are intercalated or run off the clock. If you've got the correct year, the equinox will always be in the middle of that week. It'll either be on first day, a 7th day, or the first day of the week. It's always those 2 middle days if you've got the correct year. The 7th day Sabbath will either be exactly on the equinox or just 1 day off every time you intercalate. That's another signal, another sign. And in the fall, after you intercalate, the equinox will be on the Feast of Trumpets. That's a high Sabbath, Wednesday, for 4th day of the week. And so that is also another sign. It'll either be on the trumpets or it'll be 1 day. There is a 1 day grace because this is a 7-day intercalation cycle. So you can never be perfect. It's got to be, you have to have that ability to go 1 extra day or 1 less day. This full moon will always be somewhere in this week That's run off the clock. It's the 19th here, you find the 19th there. You find the 23rd here, you'll find the 23rd there. Here's the 20th. That's the special year. It actually starts the year on that fourth day Wednesday. It's a special year. Same down here. It starts the year literally on that fourth day Wednesday. It's the full moon and the equinox and the first day of the year all in one. So the rest of those full moons, the 22nd, and the full moon here is on the 16th, and so that's also during that intercalated week. So commandment 2. Notice also in the charts that the spring equinox is always balanced somewhere in the middle of that intercalated week of 7 days. And it will not be on the either extreme edge. The equinox is the 20th. It'll be right in the middle of that week. Either the 4th day from this way or the 4th day from this way. And that's the case with all of them. Commandment number 3. We will never go more than 4 days away from the actual spring equinox for starting every new year. Now in the charts, that was that yellow number, and that designates how many days from the spring equinox this particular year is. We only use these numbers, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0, to designate how many days we are away from spring equinox. Now, look at this miraculous process. We intercalate a full 7 days each time. We always have a full moon witness when we are to intercalate, and yet we never go more than 4 days away from the spring equinox for the start of every year. It is mathematically impossible to improve upon this schedule for keeping the 4 seasons in perfect sync with the 2 equinoxes and the 2 solstices. Commandment number 4. We must intercalate our 7 accrued days only from a 4th day of the week Wednesday to the next 4th day of the week Wednesday. The 2 equinoxes will always play tag with each other and bounce from 4th day Wednesday witness in the fall to 4th day to 4th day adjustment cycle in the spring, and then that'll bounce back to a 4th day witness in the fall again. So and then it'll be on the blowing of trumpets. So in other words, the blowing of trumpets in the fall before an intercalation year will usually be on a 4th day Wednesday. That is 7 days before the fall equinox occurs. Then the next spring, the intercalation is done from 4th day Wednesday to 4th day Wednesday, as we showed you in that chart. Those are all intercalation charts. And so it does that when 7 days that have accrued are run back off the clock. The spring equinox will land on that 7th day Sabbath, like I showed you, or it'll be within 1 day. And now the following fall equinox will land on the high Sabbath of blowing of trumpets, or within 1 day. I've got a chart, I'll be able to show that on another chart. Commandment number 5. We will usually start every year on the closest 4th day Wednesday to the spring equinox, either just before, just after, or exactly on. We follow this scripture for guidance, and then we've given you that scripture already. Now commandment number 6. There must be precisely one of these following amounts of days between every intercalation year and every leap year. It must be 3 years of 1,092 days, or it must be 5 years of, or 1,820 days, or 8 years of 2,912 days. Commandment number 7. We must never violate the sacred 7-day cycle of 6 days of work and 1 day of Sabbath rest established at creation week. We simply cannot break into the middle of the weekly cycle and start our 364-day year. We must keep the Sabbath sacred. Commandment number 8. All the luminaries are used for signs. Genesis 1:14. And Elohim said, Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. The sun, moon, and stars are all witnesses, revealing exactly how the luminaries all work together as one perfect clock, which is accurate down to the millisecond. Those who say the moon cannot be used for a sign in Yah's calendar are simply misinterpreting this verse. Now, number 9. Every year we will accrue either exactly one 24-hour day for a 365-day year, or exactly two 24-hour days for a 366-day year. Yah says that we must do perfect justice with this calendar every year in 364 days. That is why we must run these accrued days back off the clock without counting them in the 364-day year. The 4 seasons still remain in sync, and the years also stay perfectly, numerically on schedule. Commandment number 10. The only optional years that work for intercalation purposes are every 5, 6, or rarely 8 years. And the full moon is always the witness who tells us when to intercalate. If we break any of these 10 commandments, then we can know that we are not keeping Abba's calendar correctly. Okay, this chart shows us how Abba's Zodic calendar, which is our Abba's sacred time, we show you how we believe it intercalates according to Scripture, and it makes the most common sense. It's absolutely perfect. It never needs to have any debate about when it actually needs to be adjusted. All the signs are given for when we need to intercalate. There really isn't any debate, and it just makes the most common sense. All the years start basically as close to the spring equinox as they can on a 4th day Wednesday. That verse that says we can't start too forward or too far backward of the spring equinox is really the clue. And when it gives all those days, the 3 years, the 5 years, and the 8 years, these are only dealing with a full moon showing up at the spring equinox. That she is our witness, our main witness. However, the equinoxes also themselves are witnesses. So what happens on an intercalation year is down here. This is the fall equinox. Well, let me just go over the whole board first, and then I'll explain what everything is before I get ahead of myself here. So we'll just go up here in the left-hand corner. You know, these numbers from the Enoch 74:13 are Yah's exact numbers between his leap years, every 3 or 5 years, and between his intercalation years, which are every 5, 6, or 8 years. Now, the 6-year one is just simply those special years when you have back-to-back 3-year cycles. So every 2184 days would be when you would intercalate from the first one to the second one there in that cycle. So here's our little meter for determining the full moons at the spring equinox. There will be every 3 years or every 5 years without fail. So here's the 2 3-year ones would make a 6-year intercalation. It goes 3 years, and then you would just go exactly the same another 3 years. So we can intercalate in 5 years. That means we have 5 years back to back of 364-day years before we intercalate. There's always a minimum of 5 years in between intercalations. Now, the other option, like I said, is the 6 years, and those are basically bookends on those special years. That's the only time you have a 6-year one is when they're bookends on a special 7-year cycle. Now, there are rare times when we intercalate on an 8-year cycle. And so, in that particular instance, there would not be any 3-year or 5-year leap year in between that. It goes the full 8 years without a leap year. And that keeps in step with the Gregorian calendar, with its rule that on the century marks, you don't intercalate, or I should say you don't add a leap day unless the century mark is also divisible by 400, and so then you would go ahead and add your extra day anyway. And this kind of is that same type of cycle. This happens about every 75, 80 years, something like that. And so it's a similar schedule. And when we did that 360 years, counting all the Gregorian ones, and then we counted all the Yah's leap years, they were exactly the same. So we believe that that's when Abba does his leap years, is every 3 years or 5 years, except on these special 8-year cycles, then that is also skipped. So we always intercalate 7 days every 5, 6, or 8 years, and that's always Wednesday to Wednesday, 4th day to 4th day, right here. And we must always keep that divine cycle of 6 days of work and 1 day of rest established at creation. This was the sign that we belong to Abba. We work 6 days and we always keep that 7th day rest. That cycle will never ever end. You can't go four days of work and then have your Sabbath rest on, or 5 or 3 or however some of these calendars adjust. No, it must be 6 days of work and 1 day of rest on into eternity. Now the 2 equinoxes do play tag, and the full moon is the referee. The full moon must be during those intercalated 7 days sometime during that week, or you've got the wrong year. Of course, the calendar always does perfect justice in 364 days because those days get run back off the clock and they're not counted. We'll deal with the 81st Psalm and the priestly cycles another time. But our 4 seasons are always in sync when we follow Abba's signs and seasons for days and years. We never go more than 4 days after the equinox to 4 days before the equinox for the start of any year. And that's by using the full moon as our witness and these 2 Sabbath days falling on the intercalary days. So what happens is in the fall, pretend that this needle's over here. That is the trip, the trigger, basically, that says that the next year will be a intercalation year. So it'll be about 7 days before the high Sabbath day of trumpets. This will also be on a 4th day normally. And so that following fall, we reset. This is actually showing one that's reset brand new. So it'll start 4 days after the spring equinox, and it'll actually during the middle of that week will be a 7th day Sabbath on the equinox. That red line is also the equinox on an intercalation year. So we have a 4th day here in the fall, triggering a 4th day in the spring. 4th day to 4th day. And then what it'll do is that following fall then, after you intercalate, the Feast of Trumpets will actually be on that equinox there, or within 1 day. So they just have all these fourth days to 4th days, and you've got Sabbath to Sabbath. You have your equinox always being in the middle of that week, the intercalated week, and just these different signs that all agree with one another that you've got the right year to intercalate. So that's how the 2 equinoxes play tag with each other right there. Now, as far as this chart here goes, this is a 1-year process of the calendar. It starts in gate 4, month 1, gate 5, month 2, gate 6, month 3, and then that's the summer solstice. That's the equinox. I should say that's the 91st day, where it's the shortest day of the year, and then it'll head back to the fall equinox, and it'll go back down through those same gates. It'll actually be gate 6, and then 5, and then 4. So there's 30 days that the sun spends in each one of those gates. Now the moon, she's all over the place. She will be in every one of those gates every single month. She's bouncing back and forth between the two tropics. But she always finds the sun on a new moon. Whatever gate the sun is in, Miss Moon will show up there every single time for the new moon. So the first 3 months are the spring, the second 3 months are summer, third 3 months are fall, fourth 3 months are winter. So that's basically how the calendar intercalates. And like I say, if you don't get it this first time, we're gonna keep repeating things and try to come from different angles, and eventually with repetition it'll become second nature to you, and it'll be easier for me to teach each time too. I'll think of other little things I can add in there to help explain it. So as far as the 48-hour days go, we believe that every single spring on day 364 and on day 1, the sun will take a 48-hour day spin on that equinox. And so only on intercalation years in, these are all 365-day years otherwise, and then in the fall of that same year, this 48-hour day here, we believe that occurs fall equinox day of 182, and then 183 would be the day of trumpets. We believe that's when that particular 48-hour day occurs. So I believe that's all we've got for the calendar for this time. So in the next video we will share our story, and then we begin to break down the calendar into greater detail, and we will continue to repeat how the calendar adjusts from different angles. And so until our next video, we do bid you shalom in Messiah Yeshua and in Abba our Father.